I am here with the wonderful Gemma Rawlins from Marie Curie, the head of innovation at Marie Curie. And we're going to be talking about how Gemma, Alex, and the team used agile ways of working to increase their pace of delivery, as well as the proactivity and collaboration that the innovation team brought along in the way that they interacted with other teams. Specifically, we're going to be diving into how they applied agile ways of working to, as I said, increase the pace of delivery. One innovation cycle that previously would have taken 6 months, they delivered in 8 weeks by applying the agile principles. We're going to unpack that and understand how they achieved that. We're also going to talk about the shift that the team took to a more optimistic approach from this feeling of we can't do it to instead thinking, oh, maybe we could try this, that, or the other. And finally, this feeling of creating processes which really work for them rather than the other way around, rather than feeling constrained by the processes that within which they were working. So without any further ado, welcome, Gemma. Thank you so much for coming to share your story with us. Would you tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, I can. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Gemma. I am currently head of fundraising innovation at Marie Curie, and I have been working in the charity sector, I want to say, for 10 plus years now, getting on. And I was a fundraiser and then moved over to sort of strategy, innovation, product development. And I've worked on a whole series of challenges, I guess, over the course of my career, but they're mainly to do with finding new ways to make money, finding new audiences to engage, and looking at future-proofing fundraising, really. And I'm currently, as I said, I'm currently head of fundraising innovation at Marie Curie, where I head up a small but super ambitious, keen team. And we do just that. We focus on sort of bringing innovation to life to not only the fundraising team, but obviously looking for those big income generating products and ideas, and making them happen. So that's me.
Thanks, Gemma. So I wonder if you could take us back to the beginning and set the
Yeah.
scene for us. I know it was around 2 years ago that we started talking. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the situation was, how innovation was going at that point?
Yeah, so innovation at Marie Curie has always existed, but a couple of years ago, so I've been came on board, around about 2 years ago, and it was fair to say that the team were just getting started. We'd moved out of the sort of mass participation team, and we were an innovation team in our own right, which was really exciting. We were there to sort of help all of fundraising, so mass, partnerships, corporate, all of those teams. And we had just signed off on like a really exciting strategy. It was really shiny. We had a great roadshow. Everyone was really excited, and sort of was all waiting for the £1 million idea that we needed to solve or bring to life, sort of, next week. But what we found was that whilst that was brilliant, the strategy was great, it was really shiny, actually getting down to build things and do things quickly and really innovate was still really challenging, right? Because we were still sort of in a big organization, lots of great established processes, but they weren't necessarily really helpful for innovating, developing products really quickly, which is what we wanted to do. And I think the danger with any strategy or any innovation strategy. So, we had all of our new processes. We were going to iterate quickly, test quickly, speak to our audience, get things done. But sort of very quickly, through no fault of anyone's own, really, it kind of fell into that sort of waterfall mentality, and we were kind of slaves for some sort of established, good, but very long processes that we were sort of were holding us back really from innovating. So whilst we had this great strategy. Actually, we were getting really frustrated in actually being able to deliver. Yeah, that's how it felt 2 years ago. I feel like that, yeah, that was it.
The kind of existing processes, which I'm sure any other folks in innovation can relate to, and other teams, those existing processes which can work really well for other aspects of the organization and have historically really enabled forward movement, actually don't set you up to be able to iterate, learn quickly, fail fast, etc. And you were noticing you were kind of getting, the treacle was setting in, and you were getting drawn into
Yeah.
those existing sort of bureaucratic, heavy waterfall processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we call it the Marie Curie treacle, but I'm sure there is treacle in every organization, and you call it your treacle. But we definitely had it. It was sticky. There were lots of processes that were really good and were there to help us, but actually, in reality, for us developing and iterating really quickly, yeah, not so much. Yeah,
So the Marie Curie treacle was real
was real.
and was real. What were you tasked with as an individual, as a team? It sounds like you had a new strategy. There was ambition there. The reality of kind of working differently wasn't coming to the
Yeah.
fore. What needed to change?
I mean, to add to that, and I'm sure this is relatable to any organization, there was loads of change. So within that time, we had changes in director, changes in priorities and organizational strategy, changes in leadership, which actually made it really difficult for us to know sort of where to start and what to do. Um, and we'd started some projects, and then all of a sudden, no, that was different, we needed to do something else. So as I was saying, like, morale was getting quite low for us, really, and we just wanted to get a thing done, right? And it felt like that we were doing so much, so none of the team were there sitting twiddling their thumbs and going, oh, I just don't know what to do. We were trying things all the time, every day, and we just didn't feel like we were achieving anything, or it certainly felt like that. And sort of from a leader perspective, I was sitting in rooms, and other people or other team members like, oh, I thought you were supposed to be super speedy. Why haven't you done this? Or we need to innovate faster. Can you please just get on with it? And you can sit there and go, oh, but this and this. But ultimately, when you're sitting in front of senior stakeholders, they just want you to get things done. And that was the task, really. It was, you're here, you've got a lovely strategy. What are you delivering? Where is it? Can we have it? You should have done it last week. Please get on with it. So that was, and that ultimately, right, was really the task for me, was to, you've got all of this good stuff. I just need you now to deliver. And the question was, okay, great, but all of those processes and the things that are holding us back are still there. But I've got to find a way to be able to do that. Um, and that's where you guys came in and helped us.
What, yeah, what how did you hear about agile ways of working? What attracted you? How did you make that connection between, I've got this task of moving quicker, delivering more,
Yeah.
and within these existing treacle processes, what was it that made you think, oh, agile ways of working could be the answer?
Yeah, so for me, like, in my sort of previous experience, I did have I was surprised to know and realized quite quickly that I did actually have some I knew about agile, I knew about agile principles, and had sort of used them in the past. And I really geek out on product development, and there were some really great product sort of templates and ways of working. And I think for me, it was always in the background. I'm like, oh, I really like working in this way. And then added to sort of all of the innovation strategy, actually, it felt in my brain, it felt like I was overcomplicating things. I'm like, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. I've got all of this information, but how do I lead the team and help the team to work in this way? And actually, it was just about like taking a breath and going, like, Agile's here to help. I know some things, and actually maybe Tilt can help me learn about other things as well, but also more importantly, how it applies day to day, especially when, you know, teams just aren't that agile, or they've always been doing always doing things in a certain way. And I guess for me, it was about, okay, like, let's just take a breath, take a step at a time. Like, how are we going to work on this in a way that like sort of really works for us? Because the overthinker in me was like, we need to do all of this right immediately, and it needs to be perfect, and I need to be an agile specialist. But that is a recipe for just sticking to how you've always done things, because you're just too scared of, you don't necessarily have the confidence to move forward.
Mm. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you sort of noticed that drive for perfection and were like, wait a minute, actually, I know that agile is a good place to start, and that part of that agile approach is taking it step by step, learning your way forward, having a go.
Yeah, exactly that. And that I don't have to have all the answers, and neither did the team. And that's okay. Like, chill out about that, because you're not supposed to. If you knew the answer, we wouldn't all be here trying to work it out. Just trust in the process and use the tools to get you to the answer, I'd say.
And so what was that first step that you took?
Yeah, so for context, and we were working in cycles. But they were lengthy cycles, right? They were about sort of 6 months. And we were bringing in teams to help us work on that, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And they were losing, but those cycles were taking 6 months. Buy-in was waning, and we and the nature of an innovation cycle is, we think you're going to make one thing, but you come out of 6 months and actually nothing's worked. You've learned some things, but what your stakeholder thought they were getting right at the beginning isn't necessarily what they got at the end. Um, and that's not great for morale, and it's not great for the stakeholder. So that was challenging. Um, and I guess we were determined, and I guess we were taking the Agile in Action course at the time, which was super handy. But we were working on a physical in-mem product. We knew that we had a clear brief, actually, and we were wondering, okay, we can't let this take another 6 months. We need to deliver this quickly. There are a lot of eyes on us. Um, and obviously for Marie Curie, in memory products are really, really important to us. They're so important for our supporters, being sort of death and end of life charity. So we started looking at our current process, um, and then we just started thinking about how us as a team would work and how we would engage team members. And just really looking at some agile principles that we could take away with us. Then one of the nicest ones was the team charter. So we had two teams from the team members from the MEM team come and join us, and we started out with a team charter, right? And that really helped that team understand what we were going to do, what we were going to achieve, and how they would work with us. We set up our Kanban board. We worked out what some of the tasks that we needed to do, but we didn't sweat so much on like what we needed to do in 3 months' time. We kind of took it week by week, and we still had, so as part of the innovation process, I'm sure if you're familiar, but we have like an understand phase where we really get to grips with the problem, a define stage where we interview lots of supporters to understand what they might want, and an ideate phase. So we had that as a brief outline. We were still following the innovation process, as it were, but we were using Agile to get us there quicker. And that's how we reduced it down to 8 weeks.
So if I'm right, at that point, it sounds like you got the team together, you did this team charter, which helped everyone to kind of understand their roles and responsibilities,
Yeah.
agree those behaviors that the team would embody as they were moving forward. You set up your Kanban board, and so you were clear on your sort of short-term tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first step for us was just, for me, I guess as a leader, was just making sure that people felt safe, because it was safe. Because it was a new process. It was a new way of working, and I was asking a lot from the team, and it was trying to make sure, and hopefully it came across, that it won't be the end of the world if this doesn't work, but we're just going to try this and see how it goes. And my team member Alex led the sprint, or led the cycle, and he was just great at just going, yeah, right, let's just try it out. And we weren't afraid to tell the team members, the 2 in Mem team members that were joining us, and say, look, this is new, we're going to try it, please feedback, it's a bit of a journey, but hopefully if it works, we're going to get an idea to you, or a product idea to you, in 8 weeks as opposed to 6 months, which made everyone feel a bit better because they knew what they were getting. We had a clear brief, and they also knew that whatever was going to happen, it was going to take us 8 weeks as opposed to 6 months, and lots of blood, sweat, and tears, over a longer period of time, basically. Yeah.
So it sounds like there was some nervousness there, and you were aware that you needed to give everybody the permission to try something. And what helped to create that buy-in was the carrot, if you like, was we think we can get this 6-7 month process done in 8 weeks if we're willing to take a bit of a risk and try doing it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ways that helped increase buy-in, so some what was scary at first was that we didn't have a RACI, but we
So
did
that
have
means like a
oh yeah,
roles and responsibilities document, quite a
yeah,
detailed one.
jargon, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we didn't have more traditional project management set up, which at first was a bit nervous for some senior leaders because they wanted to see what we were doing. But actually, one of the things from Agile that I took was, you don't have to have that type of project management. Actually, if you display your Kanban board, if you can identify your projects on your task on a Kanban board, when it's going to get done and who's going to do it, actually all of a sudden that's I guess more traditional style of project management wasn't needed. Actually having that process, having it really clear, sharing it with anyone that wanted to see it, was actually alleviated a lot of that initial nervousness, and helped us with buy-in. And it also helped me when my director went, oh, what are you doing today? I could say, here's your link, here's the Kanban board, give it a look. And it had everything that it needed. So there's definitely ways to help with buy-in, especially, and having all of that work out in the open. It's quite scary in
Yes.
other ways in terms of accountability, but actually it worked for us in terms of buy-in, I'd say.
That definitely overlays with our experience at Tilt, in that sometimes stakeholders are asking for traditional forms of visibility, and traditional ways to get confidence that the project is moving forward, like a detailed roles and responsibilities document, a long-term project plan. And then what can really work well to get more buy-in to an agile way of working is to show them other ways to get that visibility and confidence that they're looking for. And it sounds like in your case, part of the way that you managed to do that was having a clear team charter and having a Kanban board that was visible with what you were working on right now.
Yeah, and we also had stand-ups, right? So we are pretty much a fully remote team. We may come in once a week, but just having 15 minutes at the start of the day to go through the Kanban board, make sure we're on track, keep ourselves accountable, was is super helpful. And we invite people in sort of the thick of those cycles. We invite people to come along and to hear more about what we do, and to ask any questions that they might have. With the idea being that it's not about someone coming in and going, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? It's more about, we're doing this, here's a challenge. And then we have that sort of really proactive conversation around, okay, what are the blockers? Where can I help? Who do I need to speak to for that? And it's also a chance for anyone at any point to ask us a thing and for us to be able to answer.
So having more regular open spaces for stakeholders and interested parties across the organisation to come and input directly in a more regular way into your work, ask questions, understand where you're at, and provide feedback, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Mm.
was very helpful. Yeah.
Wow. I remember you telling me about this kind of eureka moment that you had when you really sort of took it up to the next level. You had a sprint, a section of your cycle scheduled that you thought would take a month, and
Yeah.
you and Alex set yourself a challenge. Would you tell us a little bit about that moment?
Yeah, it was really geeking me. I was really excited. So as I was saying, we were all on the Agile in Action course, and that had really helped us, or helped me, um, like order my thoughts around Agile, how we were going to deliver. And I think we were a part of, so this is a classic innovation term, ideation, which is basically when we look for loads of different ideas and we prioritize and see whether they match up to the brief. And that's when you tend to like sort of decide on your idea and go on to the next stage of testing. And believe, yeah, we'd just been on the Agile in Action course. We've also, I think we were on the week where we were looking at like the week long sprint, right? And I think Alex and I probably looked at each other or messaged each other, and we were on that ideation phase, and went, do you know what? We'd normally do this in a month. It's normally quite lengthy. We need to get loads of people in a room. I think we could probably do this in a week. I think Alex said that to me, and I said, yeah, I think we could too. Let's just do it. And I remember that being really exciting. But don't get me wrong, we needed to make sure that we prepped for that. You don't just go in and say, okay, on Friday, we're going to do all of this month-long work in a week and kick off on Monday. We had to think through what that meant for us and how we prioritized our time and also what that meant for stakeholders. People were generally like quite excited to hear that, you know, this lengthy piece of work was going to take sort of a week as opposed to a month. But actually, it really worked. So we had done some work to understand sort of what we wanted out of a physical in-mem product, and we'd also done some audience interviews up front, and we just shaved some time off of that as well, because Agile helps you to focus on the most important things and what are the most important things you need to know. So that had been helpful up front. And then we were able to quickly for us, within sort of a couple of weeks, plan out every stage of our week-long cycle, get the right people in the room, and to also think about some like validation testing within that week. So we got that all sorted. And Alex led it brilliantly. And then by the end of that, we had, I think it was three ideas that had gone through sort of first round of validation testing, ready for the in-mem team to take forward, which was super exciting. It was a surprise to that team because they thought we were going to take a longer, but we were like, no, it's fine. Here you go. And that really helped us sort of bring all of that agile in action knowledge to life. And yeah, we've cracked on ever since.
I love that. Yeah, the picture of you two sort of looking at each other, even over a message, being like, right, should we give it a go? And
Yeah,
that shortening of everything, that confidence that you had from that moment, getting your ideation phase down from a month to a week rolled on through the rest of that in memory innovation cycle.
Yeah, and that, I guess, that for me, that's the joy of agile and that way of working. So like Alex led the sprint, and we could be confident because we knew what was happening each day, and we didn't necessarily know how it was going to go. It went well, but because we had those processes in place, because we knew going to have the stand up, because we knew that we were only going to focus on 3 or 4 things at a time, or for that specific week-long sprint, 3 or 4 things a day, and we had the team really clearly focused. Actually, we felt really confident, and well, to be honest, I felt confident that the team will manage it and smash it. Yeah,
So
it was great.
even though you didn't know what the content would be, what the output would be, what the ideas were, you had confidence that you knew if you followed the steps and that you would come up with some great ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go into analogy world, but like, if you have a recipe, right, you have the recipe, you have the steps. Sometimes a bit of the recipe goes wrong. You might have to chop and change. You might not have enough sugar. You might need to add this. But ultimately, because you have that process, it's like a really nice foundation for you to go back to whenever you're feeling a bit wobbly. And if it doesn't work for you, and there were bits that didn't work for us, we could go back and go, actually, we might need to add this. We might swap this out. So a specific example of that was within that week, we wanted to go and speak to some senior stakeholders, or some of our directors, to ask what they thought. But actually, as we were going along the process, we found that we just weren't ready for that. And sort of the morning of the day that we were supposed to do that, we sort of got together and said, actually, no, this isn't going to work. We need to spend a bit more time on this. I think that's the beauty of agile. Like, the process isn't set. You've got the foundation, and you can maneuver it to how you need it to be maneuvered in that time.
And can you tell us a bit more, Gemma, about what was the outcome of that physical in memory fundraising innovation cycle? Where did you get to at the end of that
Yeah,
cycle?
so we got to a point where we had 3 ideas, and we were really lucky in that we had some really engaged team members who were right at the heart of that work. So they knew exactly what was going on. They were communicating with their team. So we had these 3 ideas, and there was quite a difficult conversation, because we felt, so as a team, we are really small. And we need to make sure that we are focusing on sort of the big £1 million big ideas. But actually, the physical product was great, but it wasn't necessarily that big £1 million idea, but it was still really important to the organisation. So we got to a point where we said, you've got these ideas. We are not going to lead this for you to next steps of testing, because we need to move on to other cycles. But actually, what we're going to do is support you to do testing yourself. And we're much more in a supportive role. And I guess the good thing about that was, because of those 2 in-mem team members, tongue twister, had that experience of working with us in an agile way, they felt more confident about doing that, which was really great. And as a result, we're now continuing with smokescreen testing is up. What I will not say right now, so we're looking at click-throughs. But what I would say is that we still have challenges, right? So a big challenge for us is testing, and testing quickly and autonomously. And I am still trying to work out the best way of doing that. So what I would say is, parts of our process is super agile, or super agile, and being dramatic, but really agile, and other parts are still slowing us down. But I think because we've been able to demonstrate how quickly that we work and our quality of work is really good, we can also demonstrate why, you know, we might need to attest autonomously, and we're much more likely to be able to negotiate and sort of get our way if teams can see our work and see how we've been using agile.
And it's great to hear that bringing together a cross-functional team from the beginning paid off in the long term, in that you now have these two advocates in the in-memory team who understand the process, understand how you came up with the ideas, are bought into them, and you can now support them to continue the work rather than it having to be owned by the innovation team.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, definitely. And I think that is, so innovation, right, does not belong to just my small team. Innovation, if innovation is going to work, it has to belong to everyone, and everyone needs to be able to innovate. But it can't be like the Wild West. So there's got to be some consistency. There's got to be sort of a clear vision, and teams need tools to be able to do that. And I think that's what Agile gives. It gives you like a set of tools that helps you it helps you to solve problems, solve a problem that you may be struggling to tackle. But Agile helps you to break it down really, and to start thinking logically and about sort of what you need to do to arrive at that answer, and you follow it, and more often than not, you do get to an answer. Yeah.
Thanks, Gemma. It's really helpful to see that example of applying the agile principles and seeing a real improvement in terms of velocity, speed of delivery. I know you also had another example that we wanted to share with everybody, which was around a much shorter cycle that you ran as a team and how you approached that with a more agile mindset. Could you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
So then we just got really excited about agile and started to think about how we might apply that for a whole bunch of different things. So again, Alex smashed it out of the park when we were looking at developing some tools for helping teams to innovate across the organization. So at first that felt like, and it was like, a really big job. We had a whole bunch of like templates, tools, instructions, sort of manuals, and loads of different insight, right, all scattered around. And it wasn't really usable for teams. So we were like, teams, go out and innovate, use this process, but actually, where do they start? How do they do that? What do they use? And as a result, that, you know, teams weren't innovating or using our tools. But we, well, Alex just said, right, we're going to let's have like a focused week-long agile sprint where we actually really get to grips with how we want teams to be able to use these tools, how we want teams to innovate, and also on top of that, how do we help them? Because we had previously been really had previously focused on sort of that iteration, and supporting teams to make things better, faster, different, within their own existing portfolios. But we needed to focus on big new things, but we still needed teams to innovate. So those tools were really important. So we looked at it just as like a week-long cycle. So we kind of understood the problem, we wrote the brief, we decided what we needed to focus on first, and we took that week to develop some tools or develop our ways of working and ways of thinking. So that was a week long where all of us as a core team were on Zoom in a room, hashing it out, making sure that we were asking the big questions. The Kanban board helped because we were able to go, okay, these are the 4 things that we need to cover today. We could easily have gone off topic there, but we didn't. And as a result, we also tested some of our tools as well with teams to make sure that actually, what are our assumptions? Are these what teams want? Yes, no. We got those answers, and we were able to build those materials for them. So what could have taken quite a long time, in my opinion, actually took about a week in terms of our thinking, making sure we had the right materials at the right place, and having a real clear plan, and also building out some of those materials as well. So that was a really nice, compact project that we did. And would definitely recommend working in that way. If you've got a problem that you need to focus on, use a sprint to get it done.
It's great to hear some of those agile principles in action then, of being really outcome focused. So taking
Yeah.
what can feel an uncomfortable amount of time, thinking about what difference do we want this work to make? What does success look like here? And getting really clear on what's the problem we're solving.
Yeah, and let me tell you, it feels a bit weird when you've got your Kanban board and you've got a whole team there, and you've got maybe some senior people in the stand up, and you're saying, actually, we're only going to focus on 4 things this week. And all of a sudden you're like, 4 things? What are you doing? Like, there needs to be more. But actually, it's better to do 4 things and get them done than 15 things and not get anything done, but you look busy because you've got 15 things on your Kanban board. So actually getting used to saying, I'm going to do 4 things, but actually there's going to be a real clear outcome for that, is quite freeing and quite invigorating. Because actually by Friday you're like, we've either done this and we've done it and we can put it to bed and say we've done it, or actually we might need another week on it, and that pulls through into the next week, and that's okay as well. So that
Mm.
feeling of outcome is definitely a great feeling. Having 4 things on your Kanban board is scary, but people are much more impressed when you say, yeah, I've got these 4 things done by the end of the week. And yeah, it's a good feeling.
Great to see that kind of more radical transparency and accountability was, you lent into that discomfort, and it sounds like you got some, those stakeholders around you, and when they saw that you were actually moving things through that Kanban board from to do into doing and then into done, seeing that flow and seeing that delivery really got them on board.
Yeah, for sure. And a really helpful thing that we did was, so with our Kanban board, is that we would have our cards. We would have, most important things are someone who's accountable for delivering a date, putting a date on it, say you're going to get it done, and a definition of done. And what that means for us is, this is what done looks like, because when you're a team, you're working remotely, your idea of what a task looks like completed might be completely different to what another team member thinks that the task looks like. It could be thinks is what looks complete to them may be different. There you go. So having that definition of done, and saying, we're going to complete 15 interviews and we're going to write them up on tomorrow. That's done. And that's something that we can all move towards. We all know what that is. That's super helpful. Definitely continuing that. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that additional example of that sort of really focused 1 week cycle that you took and applied all
Yeah.
of those innovation, all of those agile principles. So kind of zooming out again, it would be lovely to hear a bit more about what some of the wider results are that you're seeing, in terms of, now you have been applying the agile
Yeah.
principles to multiple different innovation cycles and challenges. What are some of what's changed because you've embedded a more agile approach?
I'd say buy-in. So I'm now confident in saying that, we've gone from 6-month cycles, so that's 2 a year, to 8-week cycles, which is, my maths isn't great, but 6 a year. Immediately, the senior stakeholders that were saying, what are you doing, are now seeing that we have now sped up. And that helps us with buying. They know that we're now well on the way for delivering our projects on time and in budget. Buy-in as well. So in terms of people that want to work with us. So when at first you say, we're going to have this cycle, we've half briefed this in. We want you to do this with us. We think this is important. But it's going to take 6 months. You might not necessarily get any financial benefit from this. And oh, by the way, you're going to be needed sort of 3 or 4 days a week. Surprise, surprise, no one wants to work with us. But actually, what Agile has helped us to do is to really demonstrate our benefits, what we do, how we do it, and people are excited to join us and actually do some of the work. We've worked on briefing as well, right? So back in the day, 2 years ago, we very much wrote our own brief, and there was a lot of toing and froing and deciding on, you know, whether these were important to senior stakeholders. We had to really persuade people, and then we had to get people on board to actually work with us, which was really lengthy. And for all those reasons, why I've mentioned what I mentioned previously, no one wanted to do that. But we're actually at a point now where teams are briefing us in on what they want us to do, which is really exciting. And they also know that, you know, it's going to take 8 weeks, and they're much more ready to put in the time, because they know that it's going to take a short amount of time, but also they're going to learn loads as well, because we're taking them on that process, and then they can then apply that to their work. So that's been great, and we're now maneuvering to a bit of both, right? So we are receiving briefs from other teams, mainly for us to support them in their agile delivery. So we've become almost train the trainers. And so they are applying that to their own portfolios, which is great. And it gives us more time to then actually go and work on the bigger ideas or the bigger briefs that they may not necessarily have thought of, right? Because it's not their job, it's our job. And funnily enough, we're not actually getting much friction in those bigger briefs anymore, in which we were 2 years ago, because now teams understand what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, and also have a bit more confidence and trust in our ability. So if we're saying we should be focusing on this, they tend to listen to us more, which is really exciting. So I think benefits for us has just been increased in confidence, sort of externally, buy-in, people actually want to work with us. And I think internally as a team, I'm speaking on behalf of them, but I feel excited, like we have the process we're always learning, but we trust in it. And I fully sort of trust any member of the team to lead a sprint now, which is really exciting. And I can be way more of a coach, which I really enjoy. So definite benefits there. I think I've covered them all. There's loads.
That sounds, yeah, it sounds really cool in terms of, yeah, buy-in externally, both in terms of sort of the trust that you're receiving, and also now, because other teams have been involved in previous agile innovation cycles with you, they're now comfortable briefing you in better and leading more of it themselves.
Yeah, and I think what was really exciting was I presented back to sort of heads, directors, and they were on board and also wanted me to sort of support in other I'll say my words, other agile delivery as well. So yeah, you can definitely see the benefits now, and senior leadership can see the benefits too, which is always helpful when you want to get things done.
So you're seeing how applying an agile approach to your innovation cycles has got interest in agile from across the organization, and now there's, you know, other parts of Marie Curie who are saying, yes, we want to work in this way, can you come and tell us how?
Yes, and it's also really helped us with some of those lengthier process times, because they still exist, right? We're not maneuvering the select, like we're never going to be able to influence the selection process to a point where, you know, it's taking days as opposed to weeks, and all other processes as well, not just that one. But what Agile has helped us to do, it's basically it makes our work tangible, and that's really helpful in in the negotiation table. When you know, you go into a meeting and someone says, absolutely not, this takes 3 weeks. It's taken 3 weeks for 20 years. It's not gonna stop now. Being able to demonstrate and show through sort of our agile, our Kanban board, what we're like, our brief, our aims, to show them, look, this is what we want to be able to do. This is why it's important, and this is how we do it. You'd be surprised how many team members go, oh, I can see that's interesting. I can see why you want to do it. Let me see what I can do. And, you know, you might shave a few days off, or, you know, something may change, or they may help us or facilitate us to be able to deliver, which is exciting. And then maybe sometimes they'll come back to you and say, oh, how do you work in Agile? Can you help us? And that's really exciting. So yes, anything to make that process faster is mutually beneficial.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing details of
Okay.
yeah, your journey so far. In a moment, I'm going to open the floor to questions and hear what everybody here has to ask you, Gemma. We'll come
Okay.
back to you at the end, and I'm going to ask you sort of what advice you have for other folks who are on their agile journey. But first of all, let's hear from everybody who's on the call. So, do you have a question for Gemma, whether it's something you want to know more about, something that you want to, yeah, learn a little more on? Anything that you haven't covered that you'd like to hear, feel free to, yeah, I was going to say pop your hand up as Jackie and Emily have done, pop your question in the chat, and I will share them with Gemma. So Jackie, you've got a question. Would you unmute and share it with Gemma? Oh, Jackie, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but I'm not sure why we can't hear you. Okay, we'll come back to you. Emily, you're up next. What's your question for Gemma?
Thanks so much, Gemma. I want to pick your brains for hours. That was so helpful. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'll try and be brief. I think my main question is, how do you deal with, how have you dealt with teams and colleagues who are so entrenched in that, as you mentioned at the end, it's always taken this amount of time, so nothing's going to change? Because I think something and I'm sure others on the call grapple with is you've got loads of colleagues who are really on board with agile and really invested, and you've proven its worth, but you've still got a central team that have their processes and want you to fill in forms and record everything, and it's that tension and friction. And I'd love to hear how you dealt with that.
So we're still dealing with that, don't get me wrong, but what has helped me is, first up, is a bit about around clarity. So I go, oh, you just need to be faster. Like, why are you doing this? This is really slow. But actually, if I step back and go, okay, like, why is this, like, what's my bugbear here? What do I need them to do faster? Because sometimes I often got into a room and go, you just need to be faster. Like, well, what at? And I'm like, I don't know. So, but having that real clarity around like what needs to be faster, like what's the thing that will help you, and how will they specifically help you to do that, is really helpful. It gives a real tangible thing for them to be able to help you with, and whatever that is. And also, from my point of view is there's going to be, it's not coming in with the expectation that you'll tell them about this fancy agile way and they will try and do, and they'll do like loads of different things and they'll do all immediately for you. I think it's about choosing one thing that's the most important to you, that's a blocker to you, getting around the table and speaking to them about it. And you'll never, it's a negotiation, right? So you're never going to get your way completely, but you might be able to meet halfway. And then hopefully through the process, they'll see, oh, this is actually like a really good way of working. And we want to be faster. We want to help you. And then you can potentially negotiate a little bit more. So you get more and more of your way very slowly. And all of a sudden it's working for you. I think also I used to come at it as like quite fierce. So like, you have to change this. This is how we need to move. But ultimately, the processes that are there are there for a reason, and people do want to help you. I think it's very few people I've come across that are no for just because they're being difficult. There's always a reason, and it's just getting to grips with that reason, being really clear on how they can help you and taking it step by step, I would say.
Thanks, Gemma.
I'd just love to add to that. I think just to build on the idea that those processes are there for a reason, I think the reason is almost without exception that they're teams who regularly get ridiculous requests of like ludicrously short timelines. So actually, I think even if you can't get them to meet you halfway, but you can get them to just move an inch and see it as a work in progress that will take some time for you. And like a big part of it is you reassuring them that you're not, like, you don't underestimate how difficult what they're doing is, but you do need to try and figure something out together. And I think what Gemma said, choosing a thing that you're asking them to do rather than saying you just need to throw your process out the window is a really good starting point. But also that gives you the chance to show to them that you do respect their time, you do respect the like value that they're adding, and that you can deliver the impact together for both of you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julia. Jackie, you had a question.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. My question was around when you said you had just 4 things in your Kanban, like active bit. So how did you decide what those 4 things were, and how did you manage the work not done? Because I think for us, that's one of our biggest challenges, and like everything's of the same priority. So like, it's just really hard. We'd love to do a dedicated sprint on like one thing, but there's just so much in the backlog, we can't ever get to that point. So just love your advice on that.
So what we tend to do when we're in the thick of it is have like a Friday session and plan out the week before. And in that Friday session, we will look at what we did that week, what has gone well, what hasn't gone well, and what needs to happen next week in order for us to reach our goal. Generally, what we'll do is we'll pull all of those things that we think needs to happen for that week. And then we prioritize really as to what those most important things are. And that would completely depend on the project, right? So we'll go, okay, what's the one thing that has to happen to move us forward? What's the one thing we need to negotiate to help us move forward? Do we need to brief it? Like, who needs to know at this point? Do we need to make sure that we're briefing those people in this week? So it's real priority of like, what moves us forward? Who needs to know what? Like having that there, and having those four things in the calendar. I'd say some things from last week may come in and we go, actually, we still need to work on that from next week. That's okay. I'd say if there are things that are dragging, that have been on our board for 3 or 4 weeks and we haven't touched, there's always an opportunity to go there. Actually, is this really important? Are we doing okay without it? And just being brave and going, yeah, do you know what? We're going to leave that off our backlog, or we're not going to touch that for a minute. If it comes up, it comes up. And I think it's just being really strict with yourself and saying these 4 things need to happen, and also giving yourself a bit of permission to go, if by Wednesday you've done all of those 4 things, great. You can add some more things. You can add some more things. If actually those 4 things that you thought were really important on that Friday afternoon aren't important by any day, you have the power to go, okay, back to the drawing board. It's not those 4 things, it's these 4 things. And also, like, you know, things happen, right? Like, you'll get called into this, you know, there'll be a new campaign. All of a sudden, you know, your whole team have got loads of different pieces of work, and they're all being pulled in different ways. But I think that, again, that is agile, right? You go, okay, we need to change our priorities, and giving yourself permission to do that, and it's totally fine. What I would say is that, you know, I would absolutely love to just be working like on one project at a time, but we're a small team as well. So we've got other projects, other things that we need to get ready, set up, all of that. We just make sure that, you know, that when we're in the thick of a sprint, is that's our main focus. And we also communicate when we go, actually, do you know what? You know, you're all doing this, but I've got, you know, this report to write. So I'll say, team, I've got 3 or 4 hours where I'm completely off. So make sure I'm given tasks that, you know, may be smaller that week, and that's okay as well. It's just about talking to each other, I think, and making sure people feel confident in changing their minds and deprioritizing and prioritizing if you need to. Does that help?
Again, I just have to add something, if that's okay, because I really think, Gemma, your team have done a brilliant job of figuring out how to say no to things as well. Like, I think it's been really impressive to see. So the main things are really, really clear on what type of work you want to be focusing your time, which, like you've described, is kind of those like bigger projects, the higher kind of income generation projects, and how you'll say no. So you've kind of got different ways of saying no in terms of how much support you can give teams to kind of do it for themselves. So whether it's kind of, hey, we can signpost you to these things, or it's, okay, one of us is going to support you to figure out how to facilitate that session. There's kind of a scale of how hands-on you'll be, but it's always a no, we're not going to devote loads of our time as a team to it.
Yeah, I'd say for other team members, it's always a no, but let's work out how you might do it. For more senior people, it's no, but if you want me to deprioritize something else, we can. And then magically, they might also be okay with your original plan.
Thanks, Gemma. We've got a question from Ellie in the chat, and then we'll come to James, your question. So Ellie's question from the chat is, I'd love to know more about your experience with validation testing and any examples you have of this.
Yes.
So for those, just to say a little bit more about if what I think I understand that is asking Ellie is what sorts of experiments and testing do you do and the innovation team do, Gemma, that helps to validate your ideas or build your confidence in the ideas that you're testing, or de-risk the ideas that you're building? What sort of experiments and tests do you run around that?
Yeah, so testing is challenging for us, because we need to, because I would say that probably is the one space that slows us down. I think what helps us, or what has helped us, is having a bit of a testing plan. So being really clear that we don't have to test everything all at once, and actually some tests we'll list out all of the things that we need to understand and learn, and we'll rank it against what's the most important thing, what do we need to know right now, as opposed to actually what we need to know maybe in 6 months' time. And we'll focus on the things that we need to know right now, and go from there. And we do need to be experimental in our experiments. And what I mean by that is that we have to be creative. I would love to be able to have like this amazing panel of supporters that you can go and test and experiment with. We just don't have that. So we use what we can. So at the moment we're smoke screen testing, and that means that we've just put out sort of really simple ads out onto our Facebook channels to test engagement and to see whether people will click through on an idea. That's enough for us to know, actually, this looks good, like we can maneuver to the next stage or our next question. What else do we do? We've recently done a survey, so we're looking at Gen X audiences at the moment, and we have these themes that we think are real problems for Gen Xers. But we were all sitting there getting lost and going, like, I don't know whether it's this or that. Actually, what we did was we put out a survey, and we got the answers, right? And those answers actually weren't what we thought they were going to be. So that's exciting.
And I remember,
yeah,
Gemma, you did some testing when you were looking at the tools that you could provide internally, thinking about other teams as also being an audience that you're working with. You were building some tools for other teams. How did you test those?
So we did some interviews. So it was really just asking people. So we were putting, I think what always helps is if you put things in front of people. Asking people's opinions on something really intangible is tricky. But if you put something, say, look, we're using this, could you use it for us? Could you run a session? And they will, and they'll give you your feedback, and then you'll know. And then you can test, you can develop those, we develop those materials. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to have a cast of millions to make sure you get the right answer, and you don't have to test everything at once. You just start slowly, and you test and build your understanding. That's what I would say.
I want that on a t-shirt.
Okay.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks for that great question, Ellie. James, what's your question for Gemma?
Hi, that was really interesting and really, really useful. Thank you. I'm definitely seeing increased adoption, and as a result, I'm starting to see what I kind of have coined a battle of the sprints. Essentially, when you're working with different teams, they'll send something over to you, you'll put it in the sprint in 2 weeks' time, then you'll bat it over to the other team who are also working on sprints, and they'll eventually put it in their sprints, and then suddenly an interaction between two teams that could have been a few days turns into a month or worse because everyone's prioritizing, protecting their priorities. How do you keep the flexibility to allow those still to be fast, and how can you do that in a way that allows you to protect what's important but still work at pace across teams and collaborate?
Oh, good question. So you're assuming that other teams are working in sprints as well. Sometimes you'll have a real mix. So some of us will be in sprints, some of us will be in half a sprint, some of us will be in full waterfall. So I guess one of the most important things for us is to make sure that what we are doing is really clear and tangible. And it also aligns with teams, the overarching sort of fundraising strategy as well. So we tend not to work on little sprints here and there and expect other teams to pick up our work. Where we can on those smaller sprints, we'll work autonomously and get stuff done. And the bigger sprints or our bigger priorities, so for instance, our physical and MEM product, everyone knew that we were working on that. We'd taken a few weeks before to make sure that teams were briefed in, so they knew that work was coming up. We couldn't necessarily tell them what that work was, but they knew that maybe they'd need a couple of hours in this week to do a thing for us. And that's where Agile helps, right? Because previously, when we were taking 6 months, we'd say, right, in 6 months, we might need you to do a thing. We can't tell you what that thing is. And it may take 3 or 4 weeks, but we can't even tell you that. But now we can say, do you know what? Between now and August, we're going to work on Gen X. We have an ideation week scheduled between this week and this week. This is where you're needed. And people make room for us now, which is very helpful. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks for your question, James. Any other questions for Gemma at this point? Anything you'd like to know more about? If not, I'm going to ask Gemma, the question that I want to ask, which is, what advice do you have for other teams, innovation teams or other teams, as they're on this journey of taking a more agile approach?
Yeah, just give it a go. So don't worry about being an expert. I spend a lot of my time being 10 minutes ahead of everyone else in the room, and it's literally that. Just give it a go. Start small, and make sure, if you're leading a team, to make sure that they just feel safe and know that we're going to try a thing. But if this goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. We're just going to give it a go, and we're going to learn from it. And the next sprint will be, or the next agile principle like we deploy, or the next sprint or the next cycle we do, will be even better. So chill out, just start, just give it a whirl. One thing. So if it's just a team charter, do that. If it's just a Kanban board with one task on it, just go for it.
You do such a great job, Gemma, of embodying that kind of pick one thing and have a go, break down this big challenge and pick something which you can try. And I really like that idea of you saying, I only need to be one step ahead of everybody else on this.
Yeah, that's how I live my life.
Something else that I hear you say a lot is trust the process. And can you tell us a little bit more about that piece of advice that I hear you giving to yourself, to your team? And I'd love you to share it with others.
Yeah, I mean, it is, definitely that. Just trust the process. So the one thing I geek out on is trying to figure out problems and how to solve problems. And I get even more excited when I don't actually know how to do it or what the answer is. But if I have a process to be able to do that, then I'm open. And it's just trusting that at the beginning you might not know, there's going to be loads of noise, there's a million things happening, and you've got to deliver it next week. But by putting a process in place, you will get to the answer. And not only that, is that you'll have a considered, logical, step-by-step sort of journey as to how you got to the answer, which is very helpful when you are in front of a board and what you thought was going to be the answer, or what they thought you were going to deliver, isn't, but you've got all of the insight to back that up, to be able to do that. Yeah.
So that combination of kind of trusting the process and saying we don't know what the content will be, but we know what the process will be, combined with that kind of just think one step ahead. It sounds like you're also saying what's important is, through that transparent documentation, you're also able to tell the story of the steps that you've taken and how you've got to where you've got to.
Yeah, it makes it way more difficult to argue when you have that step-by-step, all those step-by-steps documented, and you can tell a real story about how you got there, for sure.
Great. We've got one final question before I wrap up and ask you for any other pearls of wisdom, Gemma, and that's from Emily in the chat. And she says, how do you deal with senior leads asking for detailed year-long project plans? Is it mostly by sharing a Kanban board and team charter? Or is it other things you do when, a senior leader comes and says, right, what's the long-term plan here? How do you handle that?
So we have a pipeline. Interesting thing about a pipeline is when you try and produce a year-long pipeline, what you say you're going to start in December when you're putting it together in January always changes. So you could definitely produce a year-long pipe for me. You could definitely produce a year-long pipeline. All of the senior guys will nod and say that's great. But in reality, and the nature of innovation and the sector at the moment, the pipeline will always change. And what you thought was going to be really, really important in January is no longer relevant in December. So what I'm trying to do, and it's definitely a journey, right, is to have a now and next approach to the pipeline. So for instance, I'm pulling one together now, and we've got 3 things that we want to work on. And for me, that's now, next, later. And that for me feels about right, and I'm currently working with senior leaders to make sure that that feels okay for them as well. On the whole, it does. There's always going to be someone that wants to work, make sure that you have something a year in advance. But to be honest, for me, it's just that telling that story, and also having some like real life scenarios where I go, do you remember last year when we had that pipeline? It was a year long. I'd done detailed briefs for everything over the next 12 months, and we probably only delivered 2 things, and you wanted me to do a whole bunch of other things. Well, we're not going to do like that was then, this is what we're going to do now. And also talking about the benefits of that, it enables the team to be much more flexible. And I think if team members or senior leaders are regularly updated on what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's next, the insight you've uncovered, and how that may translate into other projects, and making sure that you're really communicating that clearly, they'll generally feel more comfortable. I think generally it's when you sort of disappear for 6 months, come with something that they didn't think you were doing, and then aren't able to tell you, or aren't able to tell you what you're doing in the next cycle or the cycle after that. So it's just about good communication as well. So pipeline, now, next, and then communication plan, just to make sure that they know what you're doing, but you don't have to be so rigid to have that big year-long plan. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks for your question, Emily. And thank you, Gemma, so much for sharing your experience. Are you happy? Where can people find out more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, always happy to chat. Can talk about this all day. I'm on LinkedIn. Gemma Rawlins. Yeah.